Welcome to another Coffee with Samso, where we speak with ASX companies and the guys who run these companies to give us a sort of a narrative of what they do. Today we've got Mount Ridley Mines here today with Guy LePage, who is the non-exec director. Their ASX code is MRD and their current market cap is 29.29 million. So look, they've got an interesting project, a rare earth project down just north of Esperance. So, Guy, welcome to Coffee with Samso.
Great, thanks for having me.
Look, Guy, it's as I said, it's another different story. It's rare earth, and what I think is interesting and could be a positive is that you're 35 k's from Esperance. So, can you maybe just give us an intro of yourself and then just tell us a story?
Sure, I'm a geologist by trade now, director at RM Corporate Finance. Involved most in the sort of small to mid-cap miners. Been associated with Mount Ridley for about 10 years now as a non-exec, and originally got involved because of the nickel potential down the Albany-Fraser range. So that was my initial interest. We brought that project in 10 years ago, and that took us up till probably the beginning of last year, sort of focusing on nickel.
So I'm guessing that the nickel project sort of developed into what we have today as a rare earth project.
That's correct. So we were doing a review of the nickel potential last year with a few consultants, and in the process they realised that we'd been drilling through some Eocene sediments that overlie the Proterozoic, the basement rocks, which is where all the focus of nickel exploration has been in the Albany-Fraser range belt, and identify the rare earths. So we obviously weren't looking closely enough at the assays for a period of time, and so that sort of sparked a bit of interest in rare earths, and hence we went and re-assayed a lot of the old pulps from the air core drilling, and that's most of the results that we've put out to date has been from that re-assay.
I mean, the rare earth industry, the rare earth sector, has always been, in Australia anyway, been hard rock based. It's only of recent we're getting a lot of this ionic sand type style deposits coming out.
Yeah.
You know, obviously when you guys did the review, I mean, was it a surprise or were you guys looking for that?
No, we weren't looking for anything in those cover sequences. So it was really sort of Nigel Brown and his consulting team who'd started looking at it. There had been occurrences known of rare earths in the region, but it wasn't an area that was very well understood. So, you know, there's been other occurrences from companies like Mika, the new listing from Odette Minerals, but, you know, whether it's an ionic clay or some other classification, we know there's rare earth in clay. We thought it was an ionic bond, but we're not so sure now. So it's early days in our understanding.
Okay. Look, I guess in rare earths, a lot of people would sort of know or not know, I guess, in some point. It's really about the permanent magnets.
Yeah.
The two participants in the rare earth series, neodymium and dysprosium, are the key. Is that what we're talking about
here? Well,
that,
and you can add in yttrium and terbium. So they're the heavies that we're looking for, and we've got over 50% of our rare earth component are those elements. So that's a very positive sign. And you do see some variation in the Albany-Fraser range. Some areas have a high proportion of lights, which I don't think are as attractive. Obviously, most people know Lynas, which is predominantly a producer of lights, and they're obviously building that refinery in Kalgoorlie. So our understanding's evolving, and the level of expertise in WA is building, but we're starting from a fairly low base.
Okay, and I guess when we talk about TREO, total rare earth oxides, can you just give guys out there an understanding what it means? Because we're used to grams per tonne, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you go, probably the best thing to do is go into our quarterly report and look at the two back pages, and you can add up the rare earth oxide elements. But we're looking at total rare earth oxides because these elements occur as oxide minerals. But we also look at critical rare earths, which are the ones that we just mentioned. So there's the classifications are a bit confusing. But I think the key to understanding is to look at the compositional breakdown of the rare earths and what the proportion of lights to heavies. That's quite a simple way of looking at it. Ironically, Makuutu, one of our competitors, has a very similar distribution of rare earth elements. So we don't understand why. They're in Uganda, we're in the southwest. So, it is not that easy to understand. It's not like grams per tonne gold or percent nickel, which we all understand, and it takes a bit of work.
I guess in some ways too, whether, if I were to ask the question of, how do you see the variations? So I guess the hard to understand part is we don't actually know whether more of this is because of this or etc.
Well, all we know is, we know what the grades are of these rare earths. We know where they occur. Well, they occur in the Eocene sediments. So they're, 60 odd million years old. We know that they seem to be associated with channels that are forming in that Eocene basin. Beyond that, we don't really know how they got there. We think they may have weathered from probably granites that might have been quite close, might have been from the Archean Shield further towards Norseman and Kalgoorlie. So we're getting some fairly consistent results over fairly large areas, which is good. And we are seeing concentrations. In terms of the mineralogy and the fine detail, that's going to be the subject of our work over the next sort of 24 months, which obviously includes the sort of metallurgy.
I mean, you have a big package, right? I think your footprint is like 3 kilometres wide and 25 kilometres long.
Yeah, so far, and it's probably going to grow because we've just done that regional program, mostly drilling along tracks where we could drill, because we get a POW to get in and do that work fairly quickly. So I think the results of that are going to show some other areas that are going to potentially be channels, and we might get another, Winston's, Marcellus, where we're seeing those sort of big areas of fairly high grade, consistent mineralisation.
Can we, when we look at your diagram in your presentation that you put out a couple of months ago, and we look at this long coloured zone, from an investor point of view, can we say it will be consistent if you drill more holes, or is it pinching out that you're seeing?
Well, we don't really know, because that drilling was really targeted on the gravity high, which was where we had that package of mafics and ultra mafics, which is our really nickel target. So most of the drilling, almost all of the air core drilling, was focused on drilling that intrusion. So when we reassayed the pulps, we ended up with that trend, Winston's all the way to Tyrrells and Marcellus, quite a long strike length and quite wide. So it was really an artefact of our drilling density over looking for nickel. So we haven't actually, until recently, set out to target the rare earth mineralisation. So what the orientation size of these things are going to be, clearly they're going to get bigger because they're open in all directions. And we are going to sort of start looking at targeting the channels and putting a bit more science around our drilling. So it could look very different in the next 6 to 12 months.
Could we, I guess, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible, looking at this style of deposit. It's more like an alluvial gold deposit in some ways, the way it's formed.
It could be almost certainly a mechanical component to how the rare earths got there. And there's also some sort of supergene or weathering effect on the rocks, but we don't think they're ionic clays. So there was a lot of speculation they were, and I think some of us and our competitors thought they were. So that means that the processing of rare earths is probably going to be different to what's happening in China. How different, we don't know. What reagents we're going to be using, again, is an unknown. We do know, and I'm sort of getting into the metallurgical area, which is not my expertise, but we do know that the rare earth isn't inert. We can break that bomb because we've used an aqua regia, which is a very concentrated solution, obviously not something you'd use in the field. but we did get quite good recoveries. So we know it's not inert. We were getting recoveries between 70 and 90%. So that's fantastic. What we've now got to do is really dial that back and see what more dilute acids might work as a leaching agent.
Okay. I mean, we're hearing a lot of stories out from, I've been following Taruga and Indiana, where they're announcing that they're seeing this kind of rare earths as well in clays. Taruga is you can see where they are. You can see that they've got some sort of hard rock, something happening that's releasing a lot of copper and things like that. So is there potential for that to be in your package? Because you have a big package.
Possibly not. We're seeing that sort of style of mineralisation as minerals on the Sterling project. We're seeing a possible association with the bedrock and rare earths. Here we're not seeing that. So we're not seeing any relationship between the mineralisation in that ultramafic package and what's sitting on top. So it's probably not got that potential. I think the potential is for rare earths, and we're not seeing any cobalt or other minerals sort of mixed up with it.
The rare earth story, or the struggling of rare earth story, has always been about China. Dominance of China. What's the current situation now?
Well, China still accounts for nearly 70% of world production. They've also got an interest in, through Shenghe, the Chinese, or the Hong Kong listed company, in Mountain Pass in the US. The Chinese mining methods are probably would not work here. They're they're using different reagents. Where they've got real expertise, I think, is in the separation of concentrates, which is a highly technical skill, something they've evolved over a long time. So what we'd like to do is really develop a flow sheet that could develop a concentrate. Where we're going to find the expertise to separate those concentrates is another question, but certainly the rare earth space right now is really dominated by China.
And you set the production 70%. I think Myanmar makes for 12%, and Australia makes 10%.
Yeah.
And as we know, as you said, the way they extract the rare earths there, probably will be sort of ESG compliant ?
Yeah.
I read an article about tin where the guy from Mackenzie that they talked about the potential that 90% or so of tin sources could have this ESG issue.
Yeah.
And hence, obviously the obvious thing that flows from there is that if that was the case, then supply is going to be a problem and price would go up and etc. Could you see this happening here?
Well, it certainly could. I mean, I think ESG is a word that's thrown around. I'm not sure people really understand it because, we've had the same issue with, conflict minerals and, cobalt coming out of the DRC, child labour, all that sort of stuff. A lot of the rare earths are consumed within China, so I don't think ESG is going to be a problem there necessarily. But certainly for, the US and Australia, we're going to be looking a lot closer at the provenance of these minerals, of which rare earths is one, and security of supply, sovereign risk, all those issues.
Yeah. I guess, the shifting geopolitical over the last 3 years is basically driving a lot of this. Yeah,
we're going back to sort of, the Roman times when, they were sort of conquering all these nations to get security over metals and other commodities. It's no different here. And I think rare earths is one that the US, Australia, Europe doesn't have a firm grip on, and it needs to. Well, that's the perception from the West anyway.
I mean, I just read an article today in the West that there is now a group that's been set up with a lot of Western nations to look at funding or co-funding or helping out critical minerals.
Yeah.
Which is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, and we saw that US agency cut a debt deal on Citroen and zinc project in Greenland with that ASX company Ironbark Zinc. So there's a lot of moves afoot right now to support, new developments, particularly in the critical space. And it appears that, copper and nickel and zinc, all these metals are going to be in short supply. So it's not just the rare earth market that's subject to that supply-demand squeeze.
Okay. Look, going forward, news flow, what's the people out there going to...
Well, we've got another POW for 20,000 metres coming up. So we're going to expand our current round of drilling. So we've got a lot, 6 or 7, key targets identified already that were from the REEs, those pulps. So I think the outline of our mineralised envelope is going to look very different in 6 months. So in parallel with that, we're going to continue on the metallurgical test work. So that's a key part of it, because really we don't know what grades work in rare earths. We've got an idea what might work in China, and looking at the Makutu studies what might work, but here in Australia with the style of mineralisation we're seeing in the Albany-Fraser range, we don't really know, what a cut-off grade could look like, what an economic grade is going to look like, because we haven't done enough work on the metallurgy. So I think that's going to be important to run that in parallel.
Environmental issues on a project like this is sort of goes hand in hand. I'm sure you sort of had lots of discussions about it. And can you give a narrative on what's happening?
Well, I think if and I'm making an assumption, we're going to look at a leach circuit to recover these metals, is probably going to be containerised. So we're going to put it in vats. We're going to have to, if there's any tailings, we're going to have to neutralise it. So it's a lot different from the study we did at Mount Thirsty, 200 kilometres to the north, where we're looking at a sulphuric acid leach and a neutralisation. So I would envisage we are going to be using acids clearly, hopefully not nitric, maybe a sulphuric. We're going to have to neutralise it. We're going to have to comply with all the mining regulations. So I don't see any issues at the moment with anything sort of deleterious or that's going to be a problem.
I always try and finish, why MRD, moment to sell your soul. You should be used to it. You're a broker.
That's right. Well, it's if you look at the published data, you can calculate some numbers on what potential there is there, even on what's drilled. So you don't have to be that scientific to come up with some numbers. It's a potentially very, very large resource down there. So we've got the location, we've got the infrastructure close by, we're in a stable jurisdiction, we've got the right mix of rare earth elements, we've got a very large tenement position, we've got an active program. So we've got a lot of ticks in the right boxes. We've hopefully got the grade. So we're already a fair way down the track. What we don't know is the metallurgy. So, when you're buying Mount Ridley, you're buying a lot of leverage to, an outcome on a large resource. What I'm hoping is that we can deliver that on the metallurgy, because I think that's the key to making it a serious enterprise down there.
I think the fact that you're so close to Esperance is a huge factor, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is.
Because no matter how great your projects, if you can't get it out of port and have access to get to port, you have a problem.
And the other thing, a lot of the tenements are on Crown land. So, I've said to a lot of people when we're looking for nickel, if I wanted a nickel project anywhere in the world, I'd want it right where we are, because the infrastructure is fantastic. You couldn't get a better location. So we're just very fortunate that we found these rare earth currencies down there.
Yeah, and a good sized package, so that helps.
Yeah, it's a large tenement package. There'll be other players in the region, and we talk to other companies, so we won't be the only player. And I'm hoping it's going to turn into an industry in the next sort of 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I'm sure that will be good for Esperance.
Absolutely.
That region, Look, Guy, I've hooked up with Florence Drummond, who's a founder of Indigenous Women in Mining Resource.
Yeah.
And we've sort of worked together, and we came with try and get some sort of token help into that industry, or introduction to the industry. We've come up with coffee packages for fortunate victims of Coffee with Samso.
Brilliant.
And I know you're a power lifter.
Yeah,
I'm not sure-
a caffeine junkie.
a caffeine junkie. Okay, there you go.
All right, thanks for
And,
that. Pleasure.
Thank you for your time, and look, I really appreciate the time you're given. It's a good story. I like it. I
Yeah.
guess time will tell.
Early days.
Early days, and hopefully we'll follow the journey.
Excellent. Thanks for having me on the program.